This is the last Blitzkrieg from MMP Games. It's part of the Battalion Combat series. We're looking at the Battle of the Bulge full campaign, and this is the situation at the end of the third day. Just look at the front going south to north. It's not been a great deal of movement around this area apart from the front is pretty much solidifying. Most of the bridges are open now. I've removed the 19th December bridges before anyone says anything, even though this is still the end of the 18th. I'm just preparing for the 19th. There's a bridge shut there, which as far as I know is the only bridge that's still shut from the early German bridges. Germans pushed forward a little bit here around where the 276 Volks Grenadier Guards are. The main thing that's happened in terms of the Americans is the 10th Armoured Division's actually arrived, and that sort of immediately shifted over here to sort of continue building up a shoulder to the breakthrough of the Germans. Other units which are pretty much wrecked at this combat command here for the 9th Armoured, and there's a 109th 28th formation here, which is in, they were both very small formations anyway. They're in a pretty nasty state. In terms of 352nd, they're pushing forward further. A lot of German units are flipping over to their mobile sides, which you say that's another problem. You've got to remember there's mud. I haven't mentioned the fact that it's muddy conditions, so truck movements poor. But when you're flipped over here with a mobile leg movement, you make quite a lot of progress. Because it's only truck units that are effectively doubled in terms of movement. Armour and leg are fine. Going a little bit further here, the third, is it third? No, it's the 5th Para Division from the Germans is basically, yeah, again, it's in a mobile state and it's moving into pretty much a vacuum here at the moment. In terms of units that are arriving, you've got a combat command, which is a fairly weak unit from the 10th Armoured that's moved into this area, providing at least some sort of blockage to the south. The big thing is the arrival of the 101st Airborne. Now, the thing about this game, it doesn't bring units on at on the edge of the board like most games and move them all the way to the actual position. It has starting hexes, and Battalion was one of the starting hexes. So not only did they get a start in a used condition, they actually got an activation. So they're sort of pushed out a little bit to try and extend a sort of front around Bastogne rather than just in Bastogne itself. You've got the arrival of the 116th Panzer, and elements of the Panzer Lehr are getting close to Bastogne, so the Germans are sort of they're edging around the Bastogne area. Obviously, because I don't look at the reinforcement schedule, I have no idea that the 101st Airborne were going to arrive that turn. And I suspected they might do, but that's one of the advantages of not studying your reinforcement schedules. You get a bit of a surprise when you're playing solo. If we go a bit further north, remnants of the 112th 28th, sort of, they were actually pocketed, but they're not now. But some of these formations, their main supply routes were compromised, so their trains are actually off board, which made it almost impossible for them to activate, because you've got a -3 MSR, plus you've got your -1 snafu on the Americans to represent the effect that the Americans were surprised and in a bit of a chaotic state. The Germans got a +1 snafu, reflecting that they were prepared for this offensive. So there's quite a bit of a gap here. There's even elements of the what was that one? 116 Panzer again that moved over there. So the 116s were pretty much operating at the end of its command and control line. But there's very, very little in the way of American units here. Volksgrenadier units have been pushing against these pocketed units here, nabbing a few units and killing them. You've got the 2nd Panzer has moved up here along this road. It's made quite a bit of a penetration. There was virtually nothing there in terms of defence. That there are elements of the 7th Armoured, that's filled in this gap, but the 7th Armoured has shifted north a bit to try and build up the front over here. We've got the 106th Division, which is holding pretty solid there. The problem is they're likely to get outflanked. It'd probably be a good idea for them to fall back on Saint-Vith, or even pull out, get their head out of this noose that's developing around them. You've got the 82nd Airborne, which was another reinforcement which arrived over here within 5 hexes of the start hex. That managed to get an activation as well and is moving into this big gap here, trying to at least form some sort of block on German units penetrating further west. If we look at movement around the 106th Infantry, the Germans are really just pushing against those outlying units there, not making a huge amount of progress. During this turn we had 2 new SS Panzer divisions arriving, the 2nd SS and the 9th SS. Now the 9th SS had 2 activations, but it's got itself heavily tangled up with the 1st SS, which was already on the board. American units in this area are in a terrible mess. 14th Cavalry is retreating. The 99th Infantry Division's in a shocking state. In terms of the other main Panzer attack, you've got Kampfgruppe and Piper and the 12th SS over there are cutting their way through. There's been a lot of American resistance here. The problem is when facing Panzer divisions, they can cause a lot of casualties and cut a gap in the front because of the fact they've got their what do you call them, engagement zones on these tanks and things, especially when a lot of the American divisions have lost their support because it's been destroyed in battles. We go a little bit further up north. There was another German, there's a Panzer Brigade, non-SS Panzer Brigade that's arrived here, which only got 1 activation. We've got still a bit of a chaotic mess here. These German parachutists landing here have severed the MSR for the 1st Infantry, and that failed to get an activation because of that. I think it took a failed recovery as a result. 2nd Infantry is really struggling again to try and get out of this mess and maintain a supply line, which it's currently doing through some tracks here. Now the Germans are pressing against that supply line and probably will cut it, which will force the second to fall back. 99th, as I've mentioned, in a state. It's really in a mess. Its units are spread out. There are 99th Division units way out here. These, no, they can actually trace some sort of supply. Yeah, they can. Other American unit that's arrived, you've got the 30th Infantry Division, which is just coming in from the north. So that's filling in a gap here. So there's still quite a few gaps, but the Germans have got a lot of armour in this area. And there's no way the American units that are in place can stop this breakout from building up. But the real problem seems to be down in the south, but the fact they can't get Bastogne like it did historically is going to slow them up badly, because it means they've got to go through all these side roads. In terms of victory points, the Germans have managed to snatch 2 victory point hexes at the moment. The Americans have lost quite a few of their yellow victory point hexes, but they're the ones that don't provide the Germans with a corresponding victory point. In terms of, it's quite a lot of victory points. The green ones over here, they're still in Allied hands. So all in all, I wouldn't like to say what the situation is here. I'm not sure how the weather's going to hold up, and the Allies did get some air power, but because they were in retreat virtually everywhere, they didn't really get a chance to use it. It's just a case of trying to build up a line of units and just force this breakthrough to become smaller and smaller, so the spare point of the German attack is driven down more and more tight sort of lines of communication. So that's probably the best thing to do at the moment, and start thinking about throwing units in over here. But the Americans aren't in any position to consider any sort of counter-attack at the moment. They're still reeling. Okay, and that's it. So it's everything to play for.